immeasurable amount of hate for being a true crime ASMR content creator in my email, on my Instagram, here on YouTube. And it really kind of put a damper in my spirits. So I'm mentioning it because I would ask you to please like and subscribe on this video and leave a comment down below. And on every other true crime content creator, ASMR content creator that you watch, to help support this little community that we have, because it is incredibly hard sometimes to do this. People are mean. I'll explain that whole story in a ramble video that I'm probably going to film for you later on. But thank you for those who are so supportive and who have been there from the jump. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. Okay, enough about that. I have a solved case for you this evening, and it is one that does have some domestic violence in it. I hardly ever put a disclaimer on my videos because y'all know, if you watch me, you know, but I don't mean any disrespect to the family by covering this case, and that will be, it's a non-spoken thing, y'all know it, but I'm gonna add it to the intro, even though I'm sure. Anyway, okay, this is the case of Lauren Phelps. I'll tell you how I feel about it at the end, as I usually do. Okay, I did not scroll to the top of my document. Lauren was born in 1988, and she grew up with her parents and her two sisters in Kentucky. Lauren was extremely close and very involved with her tight-knit family. Her family is described as very traditional and religious. But more specifically, she really had a close bond with her father, Dale, and her sister, Beth. While Lauren was attending middle school, she went out with a guy, and his name was Matthew. I really couldn't find out if they were... Okay, I said she went out with, but I really meant she went to school with a boy named Matthew. It's not specified if the two were actually friends or close at all, and it's quite possible that they didn't even know each other, but they did go to the same school. And the two parted ways when entering high school because Matthew transferred and Lauren eventually moved to Raleigh, North Carolina. Unlike Lauren's family, who's quite tight-knit, Matthew did not have a family like this growing up. Matthew was primarily raised by his grandparents as opposed to his parents. He had a single mother who was only occasionally around, and his biological father was completely absent from his life. His mother did remarry a few times, but Matthew was never really able to form that father-son dynamic with any of his stepfathers. And this kind of flawed dynamic in his life is really what kind of caused him to start acting out. When Matthew entered high school, he started hanging out with the wrong crowd of people. He began abusing drugs and alcohol. And more specifically, Matthew and his friends consumed so much that this addiction began to spiral, and Matthew's grandparents eventually took him out of public high school and put him in a private Christian academy to try and help get his life back on track. It seemed like his grandparents really did care about him. He just got steered down the wrong direction. So for a time, this really did work for Matthew. He started getting better grades. He went off to college after graduating. He eventually attended Clear Creek Baptist Bible College in Pineville, Kentucky, and really seemed to have significantly improved from his early high school partying years. Later on, roughly in their mid-20s, Matthew reached out to Lauren through Instagram and started catching up again. For a few months following their initial online reunion, the two began a long-distance relationship because Matthew was still living in Kentucky, whereas Lauren had moved to Raleigh. However, despite the distance of hundreds of miles, Matthew and Lauren's relationship began progressing rather quickly. Matthew started visiting Lauren in Raleigh and eventually moved there just to be with her. While Lauren and Matt began to fall head over heels for each other, most of Lauren's family was supportive of their relationship, except for her father, Dale. And this wasn't just Dad being protective of his daughter. He had this gut feeling that something was just not right about Matthew Phelps. And he kind of just smushed these feelings down because his daughter was happy and he wanted her to be happy, and so he just kind of was like, just ignore it. But Dale's skepticism was kind of justified, at least to him. I don't know how I feel about it. One night, while Matthew and Lauren were over at Lauren's parents' house for a game night, Matthew confesses to Lauren's family that he already had a failed marriage prior to dating Lauren. This kind of confused Lauren's parents, and they started questioning his character and integrity because he was so young and had already been divorced. I don't really see an issue with it. I mean, we're young, we're dumb, we do stuff, but they're very traditional, so I could see, a lot of faiths don't believe in divorce at all, so I'm not judging, just saying I don't really see that much wrong with it. Lauren's parents, of course, were primarily concerned about Lauren, since she was really dating someone for the purpose of achieving marriage. Even so, she knew about this and she wanted to share her life with Matthew in the near future. The couple got engaged in 2015, and they had their wedding the following year in 2016. The two of them were huge fans of the franchise Star Wars, and they incorporated it into their wedding theme, which I think could be so cool. To the outside looking in, it seemed like Lauren and Matthew were this perfect couple, and they were everyone's relationship goals. Lauren was constantly posting pictures of the two of them on her Instagram, so everyone, of course, got this perception that they had this flawless dynamic. But we know here on a true crime channel that all that glitters is not gold. As the two continued their married life together, more and more irreversible problems started to put a wedge between Lauren and Matthew. First and foremost, despite the fact that Lauren's family was ultimately accepting of Matthew, Matthew's family did not act the same way towards Lauren. His mother treated her very poorly. For instance, Matthew's mother came to their engagement party wearing a white dress, very bridal, things such as electronics and gaming equipment. He would even go so far as to steal money out of their savings or cash out of Lauren's purse. According to Lauren's family, Lauren had approximately $10,000 saved up before getting married to Matt. And right before her death, she only had about $100 left in her savings account. I'm sorry, $1,000. I skipped a zero. Left in her savings account. Matthew's spending habits caused many fights between the couple, as well as keeping them from pursuing things that they wanted to do together. As mentioned before, they were a huge fan of Star Wars, and they were trying to save money to go to Disney World, which is quite expensive. But every time that they had even a little bit of money saved up for a trip, Matthew would take it and spend it on himself. Not only did Matt take Lauren's money without asking her, but it was implied that Matthew may have also cheated on her. Lauren and Matthew had this neighbor, and her name was Valerie, and Matt would often confide in her and spend time with her. There was one occasion, according to Lauren's sister Beth, when Lauren was talking on the phone with her while she was cooking dinner for Matt. And when Matt came home from work, he said to Lauren that he was going to go hang out with Valerie. And after he left, he texted Lauren and said, "Just eat dinner without me. I'm having way too much fun with Valerie." If Sean did that to me, I might boop him on the head. Now, despite Matt's casual attitude around their neighbor Valerie, this was not the same way that he reacted, of course, when Lauren had friends who were men. Lauren and Matt had multiple fights over jealousy because he was worried that there was another guy at their church that he thought may have feelings for Lauren. And these fights led to Matt not being able to trust Lauren, really for no real reason, and for Lauren to push back against Matt. I've always said the person that is really nervous about the cheating and accusing the other one and being all irrational is usually the one that's cheating. Let me know if you think that's true. Now, at this point, Lauren is just on the verge of leaving Matt, and she could not take his immature behavior anymore. She was frustrated, and she just didn't know what else to do. However, her conflict came to a screeching halt on September 1st, 2017, when a 911 dispatcher received a call from Matthew in the middle of the night. Around 1 a.m., the 911 dispatcher received a call. Matthew was, the only way I can describe it is pretending to act delirious. He claimed that he had accidentally stabbed his wife to death while he was dreaming, and that he had suddenly woke up and saw his wife. He said, quote, "I had a dream, and then I turned on the lights and she's dead on the floor. I have blood all over me, and there's a bloody knife on the bed. I think I did it. I can't believe this. I can't believe this. I don't even know what time it is. Yeah, I can see her. She's 29. She's not breathing. Oh my God." And then there's sounds of him crying. Not long after this portion of the phone call, Matthew admits to why he's acting so strangely, and he gives this terrible excuse for her murder. Quote, I took more medicine than I should have. I took cortisone, cough and cold, because I know it can make you feel good, and a lot of times I can't sleep at night." End quote. In probably the first time in history, less than 15 seconds later, police arrive at the scene in hopes of saving Lauren, but she was immediately pronounced dead. Later, during her autopsy, they saw that Lauren had obtained 123 everything just looked really staged. Furthermore, when investigators arrived at the scene, Matthew had almost no blood on him, aside from some on his shoes and a couple drops on his shirt. Now, obviously, this comes off as suspicious because it's clear he tried to clean himself off. And if you feel as though you need to clean yourself off before you call 911, then you know you did something wrong and you're trying to cover something up. At the crime scene with police, Matt had a complete shift in his demeanor. He spoke to the cops in this very emotionless, matter-of-fact way. For obvious reasons, the cops immediately take him into custody since he's the prime suspect, and it's more likely than not that Matt is the one who murdered Lauren. Now, I want to go back a bit and talk about his dark side some. As I talked to you about before, Matthew admitted to Lauren's family that he had already had a failed marriage. After he and Lauren start fighting about jealousy and trust, he admitted that the reason why his previous marriage had failed was his wife had cheated on him. He says his ex-wife went on a missionary trip, met a new guy along the way, and then left him when she got back home. However, despite this story, Brooke Druitt, Matt's first wife, came forward and did an interview and said none of this is true at all. This wasn't why their relationship ended. The real reason that they filed for divorce was because she shared a lot of issues in their marriage that Lauren did. When Brooke was married to Matthew, she also struggled a lot with Matthew just spending too much money and not contributing anything to their life together. And Matt actually cheated on Brooke and Lauren several times. Going back to before Lauren died, she expressed to her family multiple times that Matt was very controlling over her and that she contemplated leaving him on a regular basis. But she was very faithful to her religion and she wanted to make this marriage work and try to push divorce kind of further back as a last resort. As investigators dig deeper into Matt's possible motive, they find a journal that he'd written in before he killed Lauren and talked about all of his adversities. He discussed how he had low self-esteem, how he was feeling insecure in his relationship with Lauren, and how he felt like he did not fit in well with her family. Another neighbor who had been questioned after Lauren's murder was the woman that they thought Matt had flirted with. She said they were only friends, Valerie, and that they'd bonded over their similar struggles with depression and anxiety. But as they continued spending time together, Matt had started talking about these really morbid subjects, such as suicide and death in general, because he was aware that this friend owned a licensed and concealed gun in her home. The last major piece of evidence for Matt's motives that investigators discovered was a secret Instagram account that Matt had. The handle was Marty_radical. Now, I did look this up, and it is private to the public. Investigators said that the posts on this account contained Matt talking about the devil and demons. Many pictures on this account, according to the police, contained screenshots from the movie American Psycho. Now, you may not be familiar with this, but this is Matt's all-time favorite film, and he is obsessed with it. He also idolized the protagonist in the film, Patrick Bateman. He loved him so much that he has his own pictures of himself dressed up as the character himself. Lastly, the night right before he murdered Lauren, he posted an Instagram photo there was any of Lauren's blood that Matt had tried to clean up before the police had arrived. Sure enough, there were traces of blood everywhere. There was blood all over the bathroom, and it was quite obvious that Matt had cleaned it up before authorities arrived. Okay, maybe not. There was an airplane, and I thought it was going to come right over the house, but it did not. Alright. When it came to Matt's attorney, they didn't have a lot they could work with to defend him. Their main argument was this wasn't his character. And his reasoning for doing this was he was in a more unstable and depressed headspace. The only follow-up this argument in court received was a couple of letters from Matt's coworkers over the years, stating they never thought he would do something like this, and essentially arguing the same thing as the defendants. This trial came to a close on October 5th, 2018, where all of Lauren's family members and members of her church showed up to see Matt's sentencing and to raise awareness for domestic violence. Matt ended up taking a plea deal, and he pled guilty for the first-degree murder of his wife, Lauren. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After his sentencing, Matt vocalized an apology to Lauren's family, but ultimately, it means nothing to them, and they cannot bring themselves to forgive him. Lauren's family is continuing to grieve the loss of her, and they feel a sense of blame for not stopping this relationship before it progressed any further. They have put together an organization called Lauren's Light, which raises awareness for abusive relationships and domestic violence. And I have to end this part of the video by saying, if you or someone else you know may be in a dangerous relationship, experiencing domestic violence, or just in an abusive relationship, call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233, or go to the website I've linked in the description box down below called www.thehotline.org. So, I almost considered not doing this at the end of my videos, because it was something that people mentioned they didn't like, but I'm going to tell you how I feel about this case. This case is crazy to me. It is another one of those just so sad situations where he was completely taken advantage of her and didn't want to get a divorce because she was his wallet, and it just makes me so angry. There's no question as to whether or not he did it, so we don't have to debate that, but I am extremely sorry for Lauren and her family that they had to go through this, and that she is no longer here spreading her light among us, because this creep took advantage of her and then took her life. I cannot use depression and unstable headspace as an excuse for this, because I will never do that. I do not think, other than self-defense, that there is ever a reason to take someone's life. I think that there is always a way to